Welcome to Board Leadership Calgary 2021. My name is Justin Solomilo. I'm with Alberta Community Development, and I'm one of the members of the Planning Committee for Board Leadership Calgary. Thank you for joining us online today. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge that we are on traditional territories in Alberta of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Today, I'm joining you from Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, as well as the Îska, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. And we acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play, and help us steward this land, honor, and celebrate this territory. So welcome today. As many folks know, Board Leadership Calgary is a learning collaborative that was formed in 2013 to organize affordable and accessible learning opportunities for board members and staff for nonprofits. So we're excited that you joined us this year. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And if you've been to our virtual events or in person, we're glad you can join us again today. We do have a number of workshops coming up in the upcoming weeks. And if you haven't registered for those, please do. Phil will put the link in the chat there if you're interested in kind of the other workshops that we have for this year. Staff volunteers from a variety of organizations work together to plan this event, and this includes Alberta Culture and Status of Women, Community Wise Resource Center, the Federation of Calgary Communities, the Rose Foundation, and other community nonprofit leaders. We'd also like to make a special shout out to our sponsors that have supported our efforts and really kept this learning event, free of charge. Service Credit Union, Simple Cloudworks for supporting us there. Just some typical online housekeeping. Hopefully at this point you can hear me. If not, let us know in the chat. If you have trouble connecting, we also have a dial-in option that Phil will post in the chat. And if you may also want to look at your audio settings, and if you continue to have issues, feel free to message Phil. He's one of my colleagues and works with the planning committee. He is the Board Leadership Calgary participant, so you can directly message him as well if you have any issues. If you have any questions or thoughts through the presentations, where we definitely encourage you to use the Q&A or the question and answer function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll try our best to get as many as we can within the time frame. If you're joining us by phone or tablet, you may not have this feature, so feel free to enter the questions in the chat or send us an email. We will be recording the session today, and we'll make it available as soon as we can. You'll receive a link in your email, and we'll post it on our website. At the end of our presentation, a browser with a link to the evaluation will pop up. So, please fill it out. We do very much value the feedback that we get, because it helps us plan future events and also helps our sponsors know that this is an event worth funding. Some of you have already registered for our follow-up Friday event next Friday, and really this is an extended Q&A period for today's session, anything that wasn't answered today. But we'd like to say it's more of a space of reflection, and the topic of answering, like, what does this actually mean for me and my organization? So Phil will throw the link in the chat there. So if you want to join us for an extended Q&A, it is definitely a little bit more of personable and being able to ask questions and talk through some of the content today. So please sign up if you haven't already. All right. Oh, clearly I didn't click that. All right. I'm excited that I can introduce Sheena Swierenga today. Sheena believes in the power of creativity and resiliency in building strong communities. She has a background in education, and she's worked with the nonprofit and public sector for a decade in various capacities, including community development, people engagement, organization, learning, and recreation. She thrives when building relationships that nurture and empower people. So, a virtual clap, or you can clap at home as well for Sheena. So welcome, Sheena. Glad you can join us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin, for having me, and for your team for inviting me. And thanks to everyone who's deciding to spend their beautiful Saturday morning with me here. I will, hopefully, we'll be seeing what I'm seeing soon. And we will, we'll go from here. So again, welcome. Thank you. I have to say this is my first official just like speak into the box experience. So yeah, I'm hoping we can make this as lively as engaging as possible, and I hope to pause every so often. If there are questions that come up, please do just put them in the chat and we'll answer them, and there'll probably be some time at the end as well to do that. So couple things. I'll introduce myself first. I'll talk about how I kind of like to work, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty. So I was born and raised on a farm on the lands of the Haudenosaunee, Adirondack, Mississaugas of the New Credit and Anishinaabe territory, which is currently also known as Southern Ontario. So community is really important to me growing up in a rural area. I spent the past 15 years, 10 to 15, working in the community building space and working in volunteerism. I was born and raised in a volunteer family, which I realized recently is not necessarily the norm for everyone. Some people come to it as a teenager, some people come to it later in life as a retiree, but I feel really lucky to have been born and raised in a family that did that. My mom sat on the board of a hospice for a really long time. My dad helped plan the Hamilton Air Show for a long time. So yeah, really lucky to do that. And then he went on to later plan Poultry Fest. So if you'd like to talk about poultry or air shows, I'm here for both those topics. I do spend a lot of my free time in the land belongings to the Shuswap people and the Ktunaxa people in BC, along with the Métis Nations of BC. So I feel very lucky to spend time there as well. It's a picture of my dog, who I'm very happy to also talk at length about, and also about great food and adventure. So I'm happy to connect after this is over. My emails, I'll get to that at the very end, but happy to connect further and talk about volunteerism or just about being human and that sort of thing. So our time together today. So I'm a big fan of we're here together for as long as we need to be here, not past the official end time, of course. But if we finish sooner, we finish sooner. There's more time for questions. If we can't fit them in at the end, we do have that session next week as well. So this is what I kind of hope to cover today. What's the same? So in terms of volunteer engagement, people are still people. What does that look like in terms of finding people to volunteer in your organization, acknowledging the time and energy that they give to your organization, and then keeping them engaged? I'll probably do some fact checking on things. So there might be some things or some commonly held beliefs that you or your organization have. And it might strike you as surprising to hear what other people are up to, or something that might be different, or what kind of the data is showing. I will also kind of talk about what has changed in terms of COVID and what we're sort of seeing from organizations across the country in terms of how they may or may not be operating differently. I'll show you briefly volunteerconnector.org. And then I've titled the next couple slides like random things that might be interesting. I'll sort of talk about some different groups that come into play in terms of volunteerism and the data we've kind of collected over the past couple years and where we're kind of predicting the trends will go. I do make a couple caveats. I'm pretty informal. I really believe in storytelling, so I might tell some random ones. I try and protect all the parties involved if they're funny. And I really want to acknowledge that we are in year 2 of pandemic. And so like things happen. If you need to leave and disappear, press pause or do things, that's totally okay. I know on the last call I did, my daughter literally found a hammer upstairs and was like hammering on the floor above me. So I want to really acknowledge that these things happen. And yeah, whatever you need from today, I hope you take. And yeah, we'll hopefully have a good time. I also don't have all the answers. That's also a caveat I like to mention. I'm just a human who's been like learning some things and hanging out with volunteers for a while. And so some of the things I share might resonate or might not resonate or might work for you in your community or might not. And that's totally cool. You might also know us as a couple different things. They're at the bottom there: Volunteer Connector, Propellus, the Volunteer Center of Calgary, depending on how long you've been hanging in the space. So yeah, however you know us, welcome again. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a good time. All right, finding the people. We often hear at Volunteer Connector about the dilemma of volunteer recruitment. So how do I get people into my organization? Or I get a panic email on a Thursday from someone being like, hey, we need 6 volunteers for our race this weekend. How can you help? Which sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, but I can talk about some tips that you might want to use leading up, and maybe that's helpful to you. I will ask Phil right now to launch a poll, or maybe I can do it. Can I do it? And about wondering who in this space, like, are you currently engaging organizations? Are you currently engaging volunteers? Are you not engaging volunteers at all right now? Kind of where are you at as an organization? I'm going to press polls and see if it works, or maybe Phil will do it magically.
Hi, Sheena. Yes, it's already up for you.
Okay. So cool. This is the magic. Yeah, so if you want to answer that, that would be awesome, just to give me a sense for my own knowledge, what's been going on. Give you a second. Okay, and Phil, can we share the results? Is that possible?
Yeah, you bet. So give everybody about 5 more seconds.
Okay.
Great. So do you see the results there, Sheena?
Oh, no. But that's okay.
That's okay. Well, I can tell you that 49% of respondents chose hybrid of remote and virtual and in person.
Cool.
And then the second highest was that none, volunteering is paused. And then
Cool.
the other two are really neck and neck.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so 49% of a hybrid. Okay, that's very interesting. Part of my job, I have a lot of conversations with people who are engaging volunteers across the country. So it's interesting to see kind of province to province where people are at. Like Ontario is really opening up now, and BC and Alberta, I think, are pretty similar in that hybrid model. So cool to see that the people who are here today are also kind of living in that space. Okay, let's talk about finding people, rallying people to your cause, et cetera, et cetera. The research that has been out over the past couple of years, and that we've really seen organizations adapt, and that COVID really probably expedited, was the idea that people want skill-based work. So they want to know from a volunteer opportunity either how they can further develop skills that they have, or how they can use and share skills that they have. So previous to the pandemic, the most popular time on Volunteer Connector was Monday mornings. And we like to tell a story about that, of like everyone hates their job. And so they would get to their desktop computer in their tall office building and try and find something that made their soul alive. The good news for humanity is the most popular day on Volunteer Connector is now Wednesday afternoon. So we've obviously built in a couple days now that we are more comfortable in our workspace, or feeling less pressure to find things that we're passionate about potentially. But the good news is that there's still plenty of people out there looking for opportunities, but they are looking for those kind of specific skill-based opportunities. So when I get emails to the info box, they are 100% of the time about like, this is my skill set, whether it's like accounting, graphic design, leadership, and how can I apply that in a way that gives back and connects me to the community. So thinking about a volunteer role in that manner is going to be really helpful in bringing you people in. The other thing that's helpful in terms of recruiting people, especially probably now more than ever, the level of isolation people are experiencing, people are really craving community. I know we talk about things like Zoom fatigue, and that's real as well, but people are really craving a sense of belonging, and that's where community organizations really fill a void for people. So another tip that I like to share when talking about recruiting volunteers is being really clear about expectations. I think we are all really clear of the time we have available in our week and our month. Nobody likes those surprises. So if the commitment you're requiring for someone is a 3-hour a month board meeting, put that right in the opportunity, or share that with people if you're talking to someone over the fence and you're trying to recruit them to your cause. If it is just a one-day event and someone has to come 45 minutes early, again, it's really just about being clear and transparent about the commitment. I know for me, I'm on a board, and I definitely in my head initially was like, oh, a board meeting, I'll have to do a little prep before, but I hadn't necessarily thought through the committee work that also comes with being on a board. And so that's something I've had to kind of juggle my schedule to find extra space for. So it's on kind of both sides, right? The volunteer to think through the time that they actually have available, and you as an organization being really honest and clear about the commitments. Training is one that often gets forgotten in that space. So that's about like if the role requires really specific training, or like the distress center is a good example of this, right? Like we know those people need a high degree of training and skill, and we want them to take the time and space to experience that training, to also know if it's the right fit for them. But it's really important from the outset that someone knows, I don't even know how many hours of training they're required up front, but like if I need 24 hours of training before I start, I know that I have to find time to do that commitment in the beginning. The other thing people look for when they're looking for opportunities in terms of volunteerism is the clear impact and difference they'll make in their community. So what we know from Volunteer Connector is people spend 4 minutes and 59 seconds on the site. It's a really long time in the world of the internet, I'm told. And our takeaway from that is that people, well, and we know from how people use the site in terms of analytics, is people are really having a look. They're looking around. They're seeing what kind of inspires them, what kind of opportunity might feel good for their soul. They're looking for that like right fit for them and their personal experience and their life experience and the time they have available. So being really clear about the magic that your organization does in the community, or the unique space that your organization holds in the community, is so vital to recruiting volunteers and people who are passionate about their cause. A really cool thing that we've seen happen over COVID is there are people who end up on Volunteer Connector who maybe don't find something that they find is a good fit for them, and they go on to start their own community organizing and their own organization. And that's been a really cool story to think that people look for something, they don't find something that's exactly the right fit, and they still think like, okay, well, why not me? And they're able to start kind of their own space and community that ends up spreading across the country. So I think that's a really cool story. And also for you guys who are currently maybe looking for volunteers, to know that like, it's okay to say no to someone because there are, I think right now on the connector, there's like 1,300 opportunities. So yeah, it's okay to say like, hey, I don't know that you're the right fit for us, but there's tons of other stuff out there, and or maybe this is a cool passion project and a way to spend your time. So Yeah, making that impact clear. People want to know how they're going to make a difference. And we all like that, right? That's why we're in the business of being change makers in our community. Another tip, and it's something I do often see when I review opportunities on the connector, is, and I'm saying this with candid kindness, is sometimes we in organizations sit around the table and we make a whole list of everything that needs to be done, or that we want done in the next year or 6 months or 2 years. And we say, well, we're going to recruit a volunteer to do it. And we go on the volunteer connector and we post all the things at once. And so sometimes it's helpful to make that whole list and dream and be excited, but then to kind of go through and chunk the position up to say, like, okay, what's the priority for us? Do we want this project done first? And what would this look like as a project? I'll use myself as an example. I was going to recruit a volunteer to help me kind of coach organizations around their volunteer positions. That was like going to be in my head, like an ongoing position. And I was like, great, that will be super helpful to the organization, to the volunteer, and to the volunteer that would join our team. And then I kind of wheeled it back a little bit and was like, wait a second, what if at first I recruit a volunteer to just review the current postings that are on the volunteer connector and make sure that what they're tagged to aligns with what they're actually looking to do. So if an organization has said they want to recruit board members, that they haven't also clicked that it's appropriate for families, because if they're looking for one individual, that's not a family. Yeah, so that's a project that will maybe take 20 hours versus my like ongoing indefinite coaching volunteer position that I initially envisioned. So not saying we won't ever do both, or not saying that both at the same time aren't possible, but just kind of that concept of peeling it back and letting it kind of exist as a chunked project with a certain number of hours that has a loose timeline attached to it. And maybe there's a relationship that will develop out of that that will be helpful to me and to the volunteer in the long term. My other tip is making it fun. I don't know about anyone out there in the Zoom world, but I'm feeling pretty tired. I don't know if you can see the bags under my eyes. So if I have allocatable time that I'm dedicating to not Netflix, I want to make sure it's something that's fun. And if that means hanging out with a fun group of people, that's great. If that means doing something really cool and different and participating in community, that's also great. But I want me personally, and I know other people want to be allocating their time to something that feels a little bit lighter. So even if it's like something that feels really, even if the role you want is something that feels quite arduous, I think if you can find the little pockets of joy in it, whether that's like, hey, we all before COVID times went for coffee together, or even though we sit socially distanced or whatever, we all have great senses of humor, and really putting that in the opportunity that you're sending out into the world, or in being really clear in the conversations that you have in community about your organization. People always want to be a part of something that feels good. The other thing that we talk about time and time again, and that COVID again has really accelerated, is the idea of flexibility. So that can look like lots of different things. I know for some places obviously have moved totally remote, and so people can kind of do their work in between. I know for some organizations that's been like, okay, we used to meet on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. when everyone was in the office downtown. That no longer works for people. So how can we kind of, what does work for people? Like, are we actually a group of humans that Saturday morning at 8 a.m. works the best for? In terms of flexibility in other volunteer roles outside of just board positions, I think it's really vital to just have really open, honest conversation, and create a space in your organization that people can kind of say like, hey, I don't want to participate in group committee meetings on a Zoom call. I'm happy to like manage our social media, and I will send an email with the changes that have happened or the updates that exist. And if that means that you as an organization get great work and that person gets a really fulfilling job and gets to use their skill set, then it ends up being a really good match. The other example that I give sometimes around flexibility is that some of the committee work I do for the board that I sit on, we traditionally met at 6 p.m. because most of the board members were retirees or they worked kind of 9 to 5. And when I joined the board, I kind of said like, sorry, I have a toddler at home. It's the reality of my life. 6 p.m. is the absolute witching hour. I also live in a shift working household where my partner does 24-hour shifts. So if everyone's okay, I will participate in the call still, but it might mean there's a toddler in the background, or it might mean she's in the tub, and I'm happy to participate. Or is there any chance there's another time that works? And I felt really lucky that there was a group of humans who was open to hearing that, and willing to kind of work with me on the timing. And I think often we don't reflect. We work within what's good for us, and we're not always good about asking for that. And we're not always good as a group of reflecting on our current norms and checking in when some of the parties change to make sure it still works for everyone else. Yeah, so those are kind of my tidbits. I do want to recognize that there can't be all of this at once sometimes when you're thinking about volunteer roles in your organization. Sometimes like the outdoor rink has to be scraped at 6 a.m. and that's just the way it is. And there are other ways to kind of build in flexibility in that. But I do really recognize that sometimes things have to just be the way they are. And so I think there's other ways to kind of build things in terms of recognition and also regular turnover. But I see there are some things in the chat. So I will pause and just check in that to see if any are directly related to recruitment. So yeah, one from Zip Gallery. Hi, we talk sometimes on email. So the question is Volunteer Connector going to have resumes sent to the organizations? Because you guys don't do that. It makes recruiting person sometimes over 2 weeks. We don't currently on the connector have, we haven't built in yet the capacity to hold documents. That's not to say that won't come. It might in the future. We kind of keep a master list as a charity, and when we get money and resources, we go to the master list. I will say in terms of recruitment, just as a perspective giving FYI, when we surveyed organizations before we relaunched the connector in 2016, it took organizations 6 weeks to recruit people. And now we see that has shifted to 2 weeks, which not to say that we're like, okay, 2 weeks, we've done it, hang up our hats. But yeah, we have in the past couple of years seen a pretty massive shift in terms of expediency. We do also know that there is a mismatch in terms of expectation of when a volunteer thinks the time that it takes to get connected versus the capacity of an organization to get connected. And we also know that that's because a majority of volunteers a majority of organizations are 100% volunteer run, or they have 1 or 2 staff. And so lots of people juggling lots of things. And that does mean that sometimes things take time. I think in our head, when we picture organization and volunteering, we do think of those huge organizations that maybe have a couple staff dedicated to it, and can move people through a system a bit quicker. Versus kind of the other example I always give of like 100% volunteer organizations is my husband volunteers for search and rescue in BC. Those are all 100% volunteer run, and they're the people who go out in the field, and they're also the people who try and do the board governance stuff. So when they get a new volunteer, their system is very imperfect in terms of bringing someone on board because they're worried about like equipment and insurance, and also the phone rings and they have to go on to the mountain. And so, yeah, we know that as humans, there's lots of people juggling lots of things. So Yeah, sorry, that probably didn't answer your question in a way that gave you ease, but there it is. So we're working on it, and we're certainly open to all the things. So yeah, and I'm happy to maybe, in terms of specific questions about the connector, maybe we can connect offline, and set up a conversation to do those sorts of things, if that's okay. All right, so that's my couple things about recruitment. If you're thinking more about it, great. Hopefully something there was a little bit helpful to you. If not, well, happy for you to also share your experiences in that sort of space. So what we're going to do now is, this is an opportunity. It's the opportunity that I wrote, full disclosure, here being vulnerable. This is a current opportunity up on the connector that I've put up. And I have to say, it has gotten, I think, like over 200 views, but only 2 applications. So I'm putting it to you, and I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And I would love if you would have a little read through. And I don't know if you have like a note somewhere, or your phone, or just on your computer, but have a read through. And then I would love to know what you would do differently, what you would change, what you would add, if there's a way to make it better. And it's a good it's a good exercise to do on mine, because I have no ego in it. But hopefully it's an exercise that proves useful, so that you can also take a look at your own, and do that as well. But yeah, here's an example. I set the timer for 5 minutes. Have a read, and yeah, and share in the chat if that works, or the Q&A area, if you have recommendations on ways to make it better. Okay, 1 more minute left. Thank you to everyone who's sharing all their suggestions. There's so many good ones on here. Anna, that's very kind of you. Oh, really, really great. Thank you. All right. Thank you for everyone who shared. I really appreciate your feedback, and hopefully that was a process that you found a little bit helpful, and a process that you feel you're able to go through on your own opportunities if you are looking to recruit volunteers or looking to engage people differently in your organization. All right, so we'll talk right now about acknowledging people in volunteerism. There is not really an easy answer to this one. And depending on the realities of your organization in terms of budget and capacity and resources and that sort of thing, nothing I say is going to be really revolutionary, because we're all just humans trying to be humans with each other. And volunteerism is about the currency of people's time and energy and passion. It's not about an exchange of goods and services necessarily. So what we know, what works in terms of people feeling seen in their organization, is it's about individualism. So that's not to say that handing out t-shirts or pins or water bottles or anything like that isn't helpful or isn't well received or people don't love that, but that individuals really are wanting to be celebrated in a way that feels individual. I've heard stories from organizations around that they do a big public, or they previous to COVID did a big public soiree and kind of said people's names on a microphone and had them come up, and that they were doing some reflecting on, wait a second, that doesn't necessarily feel good for everyone. Not everyone wants that kind of big show in terms of recognition. And so kind of being able to check in with people and say like, hey, would you prefer a handwritten card instead? We do know universally, Volunteer Canada has done a lot of research in this space that says that ultimately when they ask people what they wanted and in terms of a recognition for their time, was they wanted to know the impact of their work, and they wanted to just be thanked regularly, which feels, I think, quite simple and not complicated. But I don't know, for me, when I think about like, when was the last time I thanked a fellow board member for the time and energy that they put in? I can't remember the last time I've done that. I can't remember also the last time we as a board just kind of took a breath and celebrated the work that we'd accomplished in community so far. And so I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're in a totally volunteer space, is to take time to celebrate each other and the accomplishments, and to not be continually trying to just push forward onto the next thing and click the next box. I've included 2 things on here to remind me to tell a story of an organization where a colleague volunteered at, and as a thank you at the end of their term, they were gifted like an inscribed compass, which is it is thoughtful, right? When you give someone a gift, that there's thinking behind that. But this person was not outdoorsy and not adventurous, and kind of was like, well, this is something that will sit on a shelf. And so it's really up to you as an organization to not just be like, hey, we know we want to thank people, we know they want to know the impact, we know it has to be individual, but to really think about the individual who's given kind of their time and energy as a thank you as they leave the door. The other picture I have is of flowers. This was a bone of contention on an organization that I'm involved with, because we were going to send flowers to celebrate something, and one fellow person was like, oh no, flowers are the worst. And I was like, oh, I kind of like flowers. And it just was it's so simple, but it's such a perfect example of how individual and personal recognition is. And if it's not your way, then it doesn't always feel like recognition. So again, I can't unfortunately give everyone a list of like, these are all the ways to recognize people. I can tell you organizations sometimes build it into their application. So if you as an organization utilize the application to add a box that says like, here are the ways we like to recognize people, can you click off some that apply to you? And that's been helpful. If you do interviews, the first time you chat with someone to say like, hey, how do you like to feel seen? There you run a little bit of the risk of, oh, I just do this out of the goodness of my heart. And that is true. But I think we all know it's also nice to feel a little bit seen and to be recognized in that role. So if you have really awesome recognition ideas, or if you have heard of ones that other people do, please do share it in the chat. And maybe that's something we can chat about on Friday as well, if people have really good stories there. I know for me personally, I really quite treasure a mug I was given. It's like the perfect size for coffee in the morning. So yeah, any questions that exist about recognition? Here we go. Comments. Cool. Okay. No necessarily questions about recognition. Awesome. It is sometimes that one that also sometimes organizations get in the groove of, and they are really, it works for them. So that's good. And people look forward to it. Other questions you can, there's a question. Thank you. What other questions could you ask in the interview to get to know them without being too personal? I'll go back. That's a great question. I think the kind of checkbox in the application is a way to create some distance with that, to be honest, to say like, here are ways we've agreed to recognize people as an organization. Have a kind of look at this list. And if something doesn't resonate with you, do let us know. Or you as an organization, there are no rules, right? You as an organization can also decide. We give out t-shirts and everyone loves them every year. And if you don't love them, you can gift them on to someone else. And that can also work for you as well. But yeah, I'm happy to also have a phone call after or an email exchange and try and brainstorm. The other ways that recognition tends to work really well, I should add, is if it's connected to the work that your organization does. So I know Calgary Reads has like a great story around, they used to do, I think like a wine and cheese to recognize their book sale volunteers. And they started giving book sale volunteers early access to the sale because they were like, well, people who volunteer at Calgary Reads probably really love reading themselves. And so this is a way to kind of tap into their motivation and make them feel recognized. So yeah. Okay, keeping people engaged. I have put magic potions here because there is a belief out there. I think sometimes that you get someone through the door and you're like, great, you're ours for life. And you'll continue to volunteer with us for the full term on the board or indefinitely. And that just doesn't exist. That's not what our lives look like anymore, especially in 2021. There's a million different reasons people get engaged in volunteering and or people leave. I think if all of us were to reflect on the past 3 years, most of our lives have probably changed quite dynamically. And so that's an opportunity that maybe opened up volunteering for some people, but also made some other people cut back. So there is no kind of magic elixir to keep people there in your space and organization. I would say we always just hope people always leave on good terms, right? So making sure that there's that regular two-way communication. So if a role is no longer working for a person, or if the workload has changed significantly, it's a good chance to just check in with everyone to be like, are you still liking your work? Are you still finding this fulfilling? And the more open that communication is, the more people are able to kind of share where they're at, to say like, hey, I know I signed up and I was super jazzed to do graphic design, but we're moving and I need to take a leave of absence, or it's no longer working in the way that I wanted to. So yeah, that's how it is. I think there's exceptions to every rule, right? There's people who will stay within an organization they'll volunteer for 20 years, or they'll do board governance work for 10 at the same board. But that's not the reality for everyone. And I think we try and address that through really encouraging project-based work and work that's really flexible, because then the hope is you can do project after project for an organization, but the important thing is that that project gets completed for the organization and for the volunteer. Everyone can feel good, and then keep moving on from there. All right. Some things have changed in terms of volunteer engagement. Lots has really stayed the same. To be honest, people still want all the things that I kind of just went over. But the things that we've kind of seen change as organizations re-engage volunteers or change the way they're volunteering. I think a lot of you kind of shared that your whole program is on pause. So if you're thinking about restarting, there's a couple options, right? You can just do what you were doing before, press go, as long as you're abiding by the local health authority rules, if that's what works. What we've seen helpful kind of in other provinces is being really clear right in the opportunity, or right in that first kind of touch point with organizations and with the volunteer, is to be really clear about the precautions that are in place as an organization. That's up to you as an organization. I know Integral.org did a webinar about vaccination policy and that sort of thing. So I would direct you to go see that one if you are interested in kind of building that out for your organization. But from the volunteers' perspective, they just want to know what kind of things are in place up front. Again, no one kind of like surprises in these unsteady times. And so if someone walks in with the expectation, whatever their expectation is, there could be kind of a mismatch there. It's important to mention that everyone is different. So everyone has different comfort levels, everyone has different realities. And the more information you kind of provide, it gives someone the opportunity to either opt in or opt out, or propose a different way of working. So if you're a board that has been meeting on Zoom and now you've decided to meet in person, I think it's super helpful to give people the option. If you still would like to meet on Zoom, maybe we can do a mixture of both. Or if you need to take a leave, that's cool as well. Or if you want to shift the work you're doing and just do committee work, that's awesome. Or maybe you're putting on an event for the first time, or you're running a casino for the first time, to just explicitly say, these are the precautions that we're taking. And if people are comfortable, everyone's an individual, they will kind of decide accordingly. I had a conversation with someone recently about the power dynamic that can sometimes exist between volunteers and the organization that they're in. So really creating that two-way communication, but understanding that some people might not feel comfortable to say, this is my personal scenario and circumstance, XYZ, so go forth. And so you might just want to be really clear that that's an option, that if you want to take a leave from your role, or you're not ready to re-engage with us yet, that's totally okay. And maybe kind of putting it on your list to check in with people via email every couple months, to just update them in terms of where you are in terms of your volunteer program. And that sense of communication, you still keep that kind of tie in place, but you're not kind of the people. You're not saying, okay, if you're not game for this, then we're severing all ties, to kind of keep that in place for that period of time. So yeah, is everyone, we got some time still, so that's good. What I'm going to talk about now is kind of who are you keeping out of your organization? On purpose, inadvertently. I think we're we're at Volunteer Connector, and I know in other spaces who engage volunteers, really thinking about the processes and systems that are in place, and who that's kind of keeping out of our the experience of volunteering, and who that kind of is keeping out of our community. So I think it's important, and my hope is that I can give you a little bit of space here and now to really think through either your screening steps, if you do screen volunteers in one way or another, or the steps to get engaged in your organization, or who's currently involved in your organization and whose voice or life experience might be missing, and kind of reflect on ways that you could potentially build some new relationships or friendships to change how your organization operates and who operates kind of within it. So I know Volunteer Canada has kind of 10 steps to screening, and some organizations follow those, and they can be helpful. You can just Google them if you're interested. Excuse me. But I think it really is, if not now, when, kind of, if lots of your volunteer program is on pause, it is a really good time to reflect and actually critically think what screening processes need to be in place, and what's helpful for us as an organization and helpful to us as a volunteer, and what could potentially be harmful. Every organization is so different. The work they do is so different. I cannot be prescriptive in terms of saying this is what you must do, and this is what you must not do. But I think the past couple of years has really taught us that lots of people are excluded from lots of spaces because of the systems that are in place. So I will just give everyone kind of a couple minutes to kind of sit in that and reflect in that. And I'm not the expert in in this journey. There are lots of people who are far more knowledgeable than I am, and I would encourage you to connect with the team at Community Wise. And the Calgary Foundation is also doing some really great work in this space. But I think it is important to kind of think about the people whose life experience isn't at the table in board work. And I know Statistics Canada did some research last year that said those spaces really could look different. So yeah, I'll set a timer. Again, just giving you kind of the space and time to reflect and think about what that could look like. And nothing changes overnight, right? So the hope is to just, maybe this is the first time it's crossed your mind. Maybe you've been thinking about it for months and years, but this is your time on a Saturday morning to maybe jot some notes down of ways that there might be unintentional barriers out there. So Hey, I hope that that time was helpful. And I see that that wheel of power and privilege was shared in the chat box. So thank you, Justin, for doing that. Um, that's something that we as a team have kind of looked at and reflected on, and I know it has resonated with some other people I've shared it with. So thank you to Sylvia Duckworth for creating it. And I did see a question in the chat box about having an upper-class female board and could use more diversity. People see us kind of as a clique. Any ideas? I think, as I said, this work that Statistics Canada has done would say that that is sort of the current norm of boards across the country. And so lots of people, Carrie, are trying to navigate those conversations and do the work. And I think there's lots of different kind of ways and approaches from my perspective in terms of the volunteer connector that can act as a way to build inclusion sometimes in itself. We know that boards inadvertently sometimes like begets like, right? You need some more board members. And so people turn to their circle of friends or the people they know in community, and that sort of reinforces a similar group. And so sometimes just putting something up on Volunteer Connector that gets the algorithms to kind of work and give people access who might normally not see your opportunity is sometimes a helpful way. And there are people working in that space. I community-wise is doing some work, and I think like they always do awesome work, the Calgary Foundation as well. And so the things that I've learned on our journey is it's really about the relationships first and building those in a really authentic way. So no easy solutions ever when it comes to that work. All right, this is the Volunteer Connector. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it. We're really proud that since 2016, the existence of the connector has resulted in 1.3 million new connections across the country to volunteer experiences. So that's really awesome. If you are not signed up on the connector already, I would really encourage you to do so. We are super well search engine optimized, so it means that people might see your opportunity that might not kind of in your local community. And depending on where you're at, what we've seen kind of over the course of COVID is organizations really expand the idea of their reach and borders. So the idea that like, you might be a local community organization and you might have previously just found people kind of within your area code, but people have really opened up to the idea that like, wait a second, why couldn't we have a volunteer from Toronto? If the match kind of works in terms of the project that needs to be done, or the participation and the time zones kind of work out and align. So on the connector, you do have the opportunity when you post to recruit from those varying kind of spaces. So you can recruit nationally from across the country, which some organizations choose to do. You can recruit locally from with 50 kilometers from within your area code, which is sometimes important for people, or you can kind of recruit across the province if that's important. I know some organizations have really gone with that regional approach of they gather 4 times a year. And so it is important that people are just kind of driving to those meetings, and it varies based on postings. So I think, yeah, if you feel like it's helpful to you, please do sign up. It is free. We do have a scheduling feature that is subscription based for $10 a month, but recruiting volunteers on the connector is free. And I would really encourage you to use the tags and make sure that you're really narrowing who's maybe looking at your opportunity. As I said, what we know so far from the connector is that people do really peruse and they look for something that is kind of inspiring to them. So you have really the opportunity to catch someone's eye, as it were. Yeah, so that's the connector. Happy to answer any more questions that might exist. I see a question in the chat, which I'll answer. So how do you screen people from another community? Same way, just online. And yeah, I would say that's the approach that organizations have taken, depending on the role. So they just do it, but they've moved everything onto Zoom, or sometimes it can look, it can look a little bit different, that they've minimized the screening so much that there is really not the same level required. And so it ends up just being like a phone call to be like, okay, great, this works, this works. It just sort of depends on the role, what the organization is looking for. Volunteer Connector accessible nationally. It's focused on single province. That's a great question. We do have regional partners across the country. So if you go on Google and put in Volunteer Connector, it is there. We do kind of, we work with local umbrella organizations across the country. And so it kind of populates based on where you are across the country. So, but it is available for anyone kind of looking. So yeah, we actually had our first call the other day to our voicemail from a woman in Toronto who was looking for a volunteer opportunity for her son who was 11. So that was pretty cool to be able to help support her in Toronto and encourage her to connect on the connector there. So yeah, have a look. And again, happy to chat more about the specifics of the connector and recommendations. If you are using it and you have feedback, we're always willing to have and listen to those as well. Okay, we will chat right now about some of those different groups that exist in terms of volunteering and what we know about how they operate, and maybe some opportunities that exist that you may not have thought of before. So corporate groups, I used to work for a pretty large organization, and this was how the story went. Someone would call and they would say, we have an opportunity for a group of 50 people. They'd like to come to your organization and do whatever work. You figure it out. It's going to be great employee engagement. Go. And I would immediately sweat profusely. And I would be like, okay, I got to find something for these 50 people to do for 1 hour on this specific date. It's very stressful for me as someone who engaged volunteers. And I do still hear these stories, probably less so with COVID. But, oh, go back here. Yeah, so that may or may not be a reality for your organization, or you may or may not be interested in developing those kind of relationships. I was very happy to learn from Elizabeth Dove, who's the Director of Corporate Citizenship at Volunteer Canada. A couple years ago, she came and did a facilitation here in Calgary, and she has great relationships with corporate groups. And so she asked them, like, what if an organization says no? Like, what happens? Does that mean that you won't donate to them? Does that mean that you will like put them on your blacklist? And the universal response was like, no, that would be totally fine. If we would rather have a really authentic relationship that's beneficial to the organization. We just don't know. So this is the approach we've been taking. So I would encourage everyone, if you once we're kind of out of this, if you do get those calls, or maybe you are starting to get them now, depending on where you are, about groups wanting to help, it's totally okay to say no, or to not just say a flat no, but to say like, hey, I'd really love to have a conversation and develop an opportunity that feels really authentic and good for both of us. So I think that's this is your permission if you needed it, because I think people are really moving in the direction of wanting those quite authentic engagement moments. And yeah, I think it definitely is possible. And companies are really wanting to be more corporate responsibility is something that's really coming out. So that's the space that we all hold in community, right? Which is really, really cool. So families, it's become my favorite topic lately. This is the time of year that lots of people start to feel quite philanthropic, and they want to have those opportunities to engage with their families that look like all sorts of different things. Sometimes it's a grandma with her grandkids. Sometimes it's an aunt who wants to do something with her niece. It really is, I don't like using the word untapped market because it feels kind of yucky and like the commodification of volunteers, but it really is something that is in short supply, is opportunities for intergenerational volunteering out there. And so if you as an organization can figure out a way to offer something like this, I think you'd have lots of interest. One of the things that I've thought of recently, and I don't know, it wouldn't work for us as an organization, but I wondered if an organization could do it, is if you just put up an opportunity for families that says like, we don't know what this looks like, but if you have ideas, chat with us, because I think there are lots of families out there that are really interested in participating in volunteering and teaching their kids about philanthropy. They just don't know where to start or what to do. And a majority of opportunities on the connector are looking for that like individual person to do this individual task. And so, yeah, just for everyone's information, what I will sometimes do is direct them to more like community kindness, mutual aid type activities. So saying like, hey, have you thought about your neighborhood and like who might need help and how you could help them? Or like chalking fun things on the sidewalk or something like that. But if you work in an organization and do work that you can see being applicable to families, please do post that opportunity, especially in this time of year. People are really interested in doing that work as a unit. And it might just be that you've never kind of thought about engaging families before, because that's not something we've typically sort of seen in the voluntary sector necessarily, right? So yeah, have a think about the opportunities you offer. And if you could explicitly say this is appropriate for families, or we would welcome families, or maybe the opportunity that you guys offer as an organization is a bit riskier. And so you do decide you need to have a minimum age in place, and just being really clear about that. I think then this generation of kids that's coming now is really socially engaged and really passionate about changing their world. And so there really is an opportunity to engage people younger than before into your cause in a way that's meaningful for both of you. Plus, man, people are passionate and people are tech savvy and people have really innovative ideas. So that flush of new information, I think, is going to be beneficial for us all. All right, a little bit more to share with you in terms of what's been happening for us at the Volunteer Connector and what we know about volunteering from that. So in 2020, we saw 2.2 million visits to the Connector. We're on track to see over 3 this year. What's really interesting to me this year is we've seen a massive increase in grassroots initiatives sign up. So the idea that there's people in community organizing in a way that serves their community, I think, is a really awesome story of this year, and really makes me hopeful. We added something on the Connector that allows a volunteer, when they sign up, to opt in to being contacted if there's an urgent need in their community, something like a flood or a fire or something like that. And 94% of volunteers opted to be contacted in that case, which is such an amazing story of humanity. Like, when our communities need us the most, I mean, if you're a Calgarian, you're probably like, yeah, obviously that's what happened in the floods, but I'm not born and raised, I'm not from here. And so it really was like such an aha moment for me to be like, wow, there's so many people that are just willing to help out in their community if there's something urgent. So that's really cool. And I also love the idea of being like, why not me? I can do this for my community. I'm going to rally other people to help me do it as well. And we're going to do it. So yeah, that's some things that we've seen from the Connector. Lots of our postings are for those board of director leadership positions. So if you are recruiting for those, I would really encourage you to not call it board director as the title of the opportunity. If there's a way to kind of set yourself apart from people, that can sometimes be helpful as a way to do it and stick out just in that space. So some of the trends we see moving forward that COVID has probably sped up a little bit is millennials are turning 40. And we know that community engagement increases in your 40s. So that's something to be aware of and watch for. We also know that emergencies increase kind of that informal response and community helping. But that is going to continue to kind of happen of people really wanting to be connected in their physical community in some ways, and that they're going to spend their time potentially helping a neighbor versus kind of signing up to plan a community run or something like that. This trend in volunteering has also been reflected in giving. I think Canada Helps did some research that says causes matter more than organizations. So it's not that someone wants to necessarily volunteer and they specifically care about like Shirley's Feline Rescue, which is very awesome and does very good work. It's that they more care about animal welfare more broadly, and they're just happy to give their time and energy in a space of a cause they care about, not necessarily for a specific organization. So being really clear about the cause that you're interested in and how you're moving the dial in that space as well, whether that's like community art or whatever the cause is, to be like, we care about having beautiful communities. So if you're in for beautiful communities, then you need to volunteer with our cause. So that's something to know. These are the trends we've seen in terms of what people care about on the connector. So the fastest growing ones you'll see kind of along the top there for 2021, that looks like anti-racism, the environment, Indigenous causes, gender and identity, and diversity and immigration. The ones that have declined in terms of interest this year is elections, maybe a little bit of fatigue there, computers and IT, older adults and seniors, animals, and agriculture. Again, I wouldn't want to kind of guess the reasons for those on the decline, but I'm sure we could all come up with a couple of reasons why that's possible. But and certainly if you watch the news, the 2021 causes that are popular on the connector certainly do make sense and resonate. Excuse me. This is the other thing that we're talking about lately in terms of re-engaging volunteers and volunteerism in general, is that the system of volunteering needs to kind of shift. So there is a little bit of research out there. If you're interested, there's Dr. Helen Timbrell in the UK did a report called "What the Bloody Hell Are You Doing Here?" In which she really collected a tremendous amount of research and stories around the barriers that people of color face in terms of engaging volunteerism and the microaggressions that they experience. The other thing that is coming up and that we're talking about in this space is removing barriers, and specifically around police checks. I think it's an important thing to reflect upon about the space that holds in the path to volunteering for some people, and how that might be doing actually more harm than keeping people safe. We were fortunate to receive a grant, and so we are doing some research. There's currently a micro volunteering opportunity up on the connector to kind of start to gather some research and tell that story. And we are trying to do our part by profiling and promoting calls to act, which benefit those communities. So again, I'm not here to offer catch-all solutions. I don't know your organization specifically or the work that you do. I just know that is something that we all have to be talking and thinking about, and making our volunteering spaces a bit more reflective of the community. So I will just take a moment here to check to see if the chat is needing my attention. Yeah, so if you're interested in reading that report, happy to kind of link you to it. But yeah, it's a good thing to think about. So I am conscious kind of the time and leaving a little bit of time at the end here. If there are some questions and things we've talked about today, or there's something huge missing that you're like, I came for this, I can't believe she didn't talk about it, how dare she? This is the time to sort of put that in the chat box. I also, before we got to that, just want to really take a moment to thank from the bottom of my heart all of the work that you are doing in community, wherever your community is, whatever the work that you're doing. the past couple of years, we know it has been volunteers and it has been the nonprofit sector who has really been doing the work and keeping our communities going. And so thank you for all the work that you are putting into your community and for all the good that you are doing in our society, because it's really powerful. And I don't think we thank each other enough or celebrate each other enough. So from my heart, seriously, you're doing a great job if no one's told you that. And thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I am happy to chat further. You can send me an email at sheena@volunteerconnector.org. I'm happy to chat on Zoom or on the phone or carrier pigeon or however you want to do it these days. But yeah, if you want to chat more, happy to do that. And you want to go to volunteerconnector.org and have a gander and sign up, I'm happy to do that as well. Thank you again for your time and energy this morning. And yeah, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Sheena. Yeah, we do have a few minutes if you have any questions as well. Someone just quickly asked, can you repeat the name of the study in the UK?
Yeah, it's called What the Bloody Hell Are You Doing Here? I will put it in the chat box, and there, if you email me, I can give you a link to there is a podcast where she talks about all the research. So I can give you a link to that podcast if that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Q&A function or in the chat is fine. If you're more comfortable asking verbally, let us know in the chat and we can unmute you on our side here. So if you have any questions that you want to ask verbally, you can do that as well. I know it's can be challenging trying to express what you mean through chat as well. So thank you. And a lot of great conversations happening in the chat throughout the presentation. Sheena, saw some people even potentially connecting, for further information on their things that they're facing. So thank you for that, everybody. Any other questions, thoughts? Cool. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'll just share kind of this last slide. Hopefully you get a chance to grab Sheena's email there, sheena@volunteerconnector.org. Yeah, a question about Volunteer Connector. Is it specific to a particular province, Sheena, or can folks outside the province connect on there as well?
Yeah, it's open across the country. So we tend to work through regional partners, but it's available across the country to people. It just tends to work in places, it works the best in places where we currently have regional partners in terms of like internet working world.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is available across the province, the country. The province used it. The province of Alberta used it under the name of Alberta Cares Connector for some of the pandemic response, which was really cool and very, very helpful. So also, if you're on the call and you think you are we don't yet exist in your community, I'm happy to also connect for that and help you get all the organizations in your community connected. It's free, it's easy. That's not a weird sales pitch. It actually is.
Yeah, and if anything out of this presentation, if it's just knowledge that, oh, I didn't know a volunteer connector existed, there you go, it does exist. And as Sheena shared in some of the statistics, definitely used a lot more during this time, the past 2 years at least, where folks are still looking to, put their passionate energy in spaces and having those opportunities to find them. So check it out, check out the many different opportunities, or as Sheena said, as an organization, if you are looking to post opportunities, to be able to do that as well. Yeah, and share, you have your own spheres of influences and networks as well. And so, let folks know about the Volunteer Connector, for if they have volunteer opportunities for their organizations as well. So, yes, spread the word that it's there. All right, I'll share a couple of slides here. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to do that again. Sheena, are you okay to go to the trend slide again? I think some folks just wanted to see the trends.
This one, the one that what people care about, or we're thinking this one, the causes?
Yeah, I think that's that one. Marie, hopefully that's the one you were looking at. Okay, I'll just share these. Okay. All right, hopefully people can see this slide here. As we mentioned, there will be, once this session closes, there will be a link to the evaluation that will pop up. It will be, you will also get an email of the link in case it doesn't pop up. So again, we encourage you to fill that out. It's definitely helpful for us in our planning. You will get an email when the recording is available online. And so if you want to share it with some colleagues or rewatch some sections there that maybe you missed, you will get a chance to do that, and it'll be on YouTube. I mentioned it throughout the course here, Follow-Up Friday. This is a space, a lot of you ask questions about things specific to your organization. We had great kind of dialogue there in the chat, but let's do it on Friday as well. We're going to encourage you to bring some of those challenges or questions that you have. I know Sheena also suggested, if there is, like the exercise she did earlier, if there is a volunteer posting that perhaps, hey, can we have a couple more eyes to take a look at this? Bring that to the Friday session there. Of course, it's an optional session, but if you'd like to connect further, and you will get a chance to talk to each other a little bit more, take it as a little bit of a networking session as well for Friday. We'll send a reminder for those folks as well of how to sign up and so on. I don't know, Sheena, is there any other things that you want to in preparation for Friday that you've kind of thought of, can share?
No, I think, yeah, it is a chance to kind of crowdsource some feedback if there is things you're struggling with, to hear other people's perspective and stories, or things that they've tried and failed at or tried and succeeded at. And yeah, it is the chance to kind of crowdsource an opportunity. Maybe you're thinking of something, that a volunteer opportunity you've never seen or heard before, and you just want to put it to the group to be like, would you do this? Or what would it need to look like for you to do it?
Right.
And that can be helpful.
Yeah, and Phil has put the link there. If you haven't registered, you will need to register just to get the link to the Zoom there as well. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to do that. Want to encourage you to take a look at our next webinar series, which is happening a couple of Saturdays from now, Saturday, November 20th. It is, note the time change, it is an afternoon session, 1:00 p.m. And we're going to talk about truth and reconciliation with Tim Fox from the Calgary Foundation. I know Sheena mentioned the Calgary Foundation a couple of times throughout the presentation, and a lot of things that are linking actually with kind of the last few slides there. So if you're an organization, you're a board, and you even thinking through, truth and reconciliation, how does it look like for our organization, or what is the context, or I don't really understand what's going on, please come at 1:00. The only thing is, this is not being recorded, so you will need to be there in person in order to to be a part of this webinar. So the link is there for the just our general Board Leadership Calgary on Eventbrite there. So check that out, please. We'd love to see you there as well, 1 o'clock next Saturday. So November 20th. Please sign up. Yeah, I think other than that, I don't know. Do you have any final words, Sheena, as we kind of end this here? No, she's good. Again, thank you for taking your Saturday to hang out with us with Board Leadership Calgary 2021. Hopefully we'll see many of you on Friday for kind of an extended discussion and reflection on the topic, or we'll see you at our next webinar on November 20th. We will abruptly end this, and again, you'll see an evaluation pop up. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.